Hello and welcome to the 3,500 Miles Between Us podcast with your hosts, Jobie and Abigail.
Well, folks, welcome to another 3,500 Miles Between Us podcast. I'm still in Mexico, and Abigail's still in Halifax.
Foggy Halifax.
Soggy, is it soggy and raining there?
Where it's foggy. We're just grateful for plus temperatures, so I'm not going to complain.
Right. Yes. Well, it's definitely plus here. That is for damn sure.
Good injection of heat.
Yeah.
So 5 years.
5 years ago was the big C, the great big C. We thought we would just talk about its 5-year anniversary of when COVID sort of kind of kicked off, and we just kind of reminisce about the good old days.
The haunting days. I haven't actually seen, not that I'm on YouTube that often, but I haven't seen many memorial podcast type tributes, half a decade in. I've certainly been thinking about it, but I haven't seen a whole lot being made of it.
Yeah, I saw Jordan Peterson did one.
Okay.
And then the Unheard podcast, which I used to listen to, they did one. But yeah, I've kind of unplugged a bit here and left my phone at home. So,
nice.
I mean, it's crazy to think that it was 5 years ago. It feels like it was like 2 or 3 years ago in my head, like 5 years.
Yeah.
What they say, time flies when you're having fun. Time flies when you're having fun. So looking back, what's the first thing, like when it all started, what was it like for you?
So I've been thinking about this, knowing that we're going to mark this moment, and what I've just been replaying. And you know what really struck me is there's certain key moments that stand out to me, and that being in December 2019, when our mum was in New Zealand and people were, the Asian population were fleeing from New Zealand in December 2019. And my mum called me up and she said, "Aren't you guys talking about it? This is all kicking off over here." And I guess because so many Asians had connections in Wuhan and it was all kicking off there. And at the time, no one was talking about it here. It was not on our radar in December 2019. And I remember saying something to her that really, for the first time ever, articulated what had been going on in my subconscious since 2009, since the swine flu. And it had been so much in the back of my mind rumbling around that when she said to me, aren't people panicking over there? I blurted out and I said, "Mum, you know what's going to happen. These guys sit down every few years and they come up with a virus that they then brand and market and create hysteria around. This is going to be a big cash grab. They're going to roll out a vaccine and then the whole thing will disappear after they've got their money." And I almost was speaking it, not really.
Wow,
I knew what I was saying. Well, the reason why, and I was trying to dial back why I blurted that out to her, because I'd never articulated it before. And I realised that that in 2009, when I had a newborn at the time, the hysteria around swine flu was quite a big deal, especially with babies, because they had said that this virus is really going after young babies. And I had a newborn. And we were in Canada, first couple of years in Canada. And there was a lot of pressure on me to get the H1N1 vaccine. And I held off. And the reason I held off is that I had 2 kids at the time, and none of them had been vaccinated with early childhood vaccination, because back in 2007, when I had my first child, I had a friend whose 3-year-old had developed autism within a month of having his MMR. And it spooked me enough that this is the one time where procrastination was a good thing, is I just kicked the can down the road and I thought, I'm not going to do this whole vaccine baby vaccination, early childhood vaccine, whatever you call it. I'm just going to hold off till they're older and they've got a more robust immune system. And so I had never given them their initial ones anyway. And so when H1N1 kicked off, I thought, well, why would I do this now when I haven't even done tetanus or mumps and rubella? Measles, mumps and rubella was the one that I hadn't done anything. I haven't, to this day, I've got she's now 18. She's never had one needle in her. I've got a 15-year-old. She hasn't either. And my 12-year-old hasn't. Mm-hmm. So then it didn't make sense when H1N1 came out that I would all of a sudden jump on that when I'd already faced ridicule from doctors. Whenever I'd go into the doctor's office, they'd always patronize me about not having done the early childhood vaccinations. And what I started to notice after the vaccine rollout happened with H1N1 is that all the media hysteria disappeared as soon as the rollout happened. And
over swine flu.
Yeah. So that they created the hysteria. The rollout of the vaccine was pushed on the news and social. Well, we didn't really have social media, but it was being pushed on the news. And then I noticed that everything went very quiet after that. And I say this to my kids all the time, because when they say to me, why don't we get taught world history in school? I'll say to them, is because the government doesn't want you to recognize patterns, because as soon as you recognize patterns in history, you'll pick up on their latest psyop and, you'll start recognizing when history repeats itself. And so with the swine flu, I just subconsciously, I never even articulated it really. I subconsciously noticed a pattern. And then I thought about SARS, and I thought about bird flu, and I thought about mad cow disease. And I just thought there's a familiar pattern where every 2 to 3 years, you'll blow up in the media. You'll see this big kind of fear mongering around a disease from an animal. And then it goes on for a few months, and then it gets really quiet, and then the whole thing kind of seems to just die a death. And I think that made such an impression on me in 2009 that when it kicked off, and in between 2009 and 2019, there were other things. I think bird flu had happened. Then there was SARS-CoV-2, is it? I can't remember what that was called. But they never became big enough to take over the world. So when Mum said that, and my response it was almost like in The Matrix, where all the pixelation, he sees the workings behind the whole thing. I had that moment then where I said to her, this is a cash grab. And I didn't even know the word PSYOP at the time. I just said, they come up with these schemes to get money, and then they disappear, and then they come up with another scheme to get money.
Well, it's money and control too, isn't it? It's like testing the people, seeing how far they can push it.
Yeah, and I said to her, don't buy into it, because this is just another one. And that was in December, and it was another 3 months before lockdown hit us in Canada, 5 years to this week or whatever.
Well, it's quite perceptive of you.
Well, like I said, it was like I'm convinced that the patterns are a part of the awakening process. Is when you start recognizing patterns. It's such a crucial earthquake in your paradigm shift.
Yes.
And then when lockdown happened, the second moment was I was spooked for about 3 weeks. When we actually locked down, there was that moment where I thought, fuck, maybe this is for real. Maybe this is actually authentic pandemic, and all those other times were not serious, but this one is serious. And we did kind of, I was spooked. Yeah. And then because Joseph was working on the front line and he was in a care home where every single case was coming from that care home, 2 weeks into working there, he came home and he said, this is bullshit. This whole thing is bullshit. Because we were seeing in the mainstream media all of the hype around where he was working. And then he was in there actually caring for the patients. And all of these elderly people were recovering at such a rate that they were being put up in hotels. There was 150 of them that were transferred to hotels, and they were terminally ill because this was an end-of-life care home. So they were already, when he started working there, they said to him, his bosses, no one lasts more than 6 months here because this is a hospice. But they were even recovering from COVID, getting put up in hotels, and he was coming home. And twice we put all of his clothes through the wash and did that whole kind of disinfecting. And then after 2 times, I had 3 young kids. I'm like, this is way too much work. I'm not doing this. I said, you can do your own laundry, but I'm not buying into this shit. And by that time, he said, this is bullshit. What you're hearing in the news, it couldn't be more opposite in the wards, where it's sniffles, and anyone that does die has already a terminal illness. And then they're getting these cash grabs from, you get how many thousands for diagnosing someone with COVID. And then if they die and you label it as COVID, they're getting more money. And he estimated that they made like 3 million in a 3-month period from all these diagnoses. So that was the moment when I said that to Mum, and the moment where he said, this is bullshit, were the 2 standout moments where I just thought, I'm not buying this. Mm-hmm. So in a nutshell, I think that was my awakening.
The cat's out of the bag. Everyone knows you're a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist.
And they kept well away from us, our friends, because he was working on the front line, and the place where he worked was all over the news every day. People didn't want to come anywhere near. It was like we had the plague. Like the Black Death was over our house.
Did you ever get like as a mother, I think it's different. Like my, Tara, my kid, she's way more kind of conscious about what goes into the children's, diet and vaccines and all of those kinds of things. I kind of just like my role is a little, keep the lights on, keep the food in the fridge. Did you ever feel as a mother like, shit, what if I've made the wrong decision as far as
I think
with
I
other vaccines, like the early?
Yeah, definitely. I think what was weird is that my reasons for not vaccinating them with early childhood ones was not because I thought they would be healthier, because that information wasn't out yet. I was just doing it so they didn't get autism. I had no idea that the kickback would be. And I asked them probably 3 years ago, I said to them I didn't want them to know that I was looking for information about vaccination. I just said to them, have you noticed that your friends, are you more healthy than your friends, or do you get more sick than your friends? Because I wanted to figure out why they were so healthy. And they looked at me and gave me this kind of, Mum, you're so stupid. They said, literally, everyone we know is sick with something. They're either always getting sick with flus or throwing up or colds, or they've got underlying autoimmune like diabetes, asthma, they'll have eczema, all of these kind of long-term conditions. And so I didn't say anything about the vaccination. I just was curious, like, have you noticed if you're healthier or not healthier than your friends? And all 3 of them said, Mum, we're so much healthier. Our friends are sick, always. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't know until more recently that was one of the great kind of benefits of not doing early childhood vaccinations, that your kids just don't get sick. That's amazing. I thought they would get more sick. I thought they would get measles, mumps and chicken pox, and I'd have to take them out of school whenever something was going through because their immune system would be weaker because they weren't vaccinated. And that was a price I was willing to pay for not getting autism, or not kind of the risk of autism. You know what I mean? I was like, it was
a crapshoot, right? Like what?
Yeah.
It's like, people say, well, 1 in 10,000 cases get autism. Like, well, what if you're that one? Your life is turned upside down. It's like having a paraplegic as a child, right?
Yeah.
Your
varying
whole
degrees of
changed.
severity. But I had seen in close proximity people who were dealing with autistic children and how devastating that was. To say to myself, I would rather have sickly children than take a gamble on something, this vaccine that could cause autism. The risk, like, it's so sobering to watch someone dealing with a child with autism that I would rather have a sickly child. And I had no idea and I was humbled. I wouldn't tell people because it's not socially acceptable even to this day to say my kids haven't had early childhood vaccination. So I kept it really quiet, and I thought I was like, when something like whooping cough went through the schools or whatever, I would always be conflicted. Have I made the right decision? There was no pride in me at all. I was really humbled because I thought, well, what if I've got this wrong? And what if they get it? And what if they die of it? What do I do? Because that's on me, because I made a judgment call and maybe I've made the wrong decision. And I never felt a sense of pride, or I was genuinely concerned. because I had had measles, mumps and chicken pox. And it was only last year that Mum said, well, of course, darling, I never vaccinated you. And I was like,
well, I did, because I had a booster in my arm.
well, that's because you were in school, but I was taken out at age 7. And she said, oh, you were never vaccinated because you weren't in school and the nurses turned up at school.
Yes.
So you got it. I didn't. And then I got measles, mumps and chicken pox. And I think I got whooping cough. So I was expecting my kids to have that too, because I just thought that's what kids had in childhood, and they just haven't for whatever reason. Well, people will say to me they haven't because the ones that are vaccinated are covering for you. So we've all but extinguished those early childhood. That's the patronage I would get, is we're covering for you.
Yeah.
And I would not know what to say because I didn't know enough at that time that that's not the case, that it's actually more hygiene related, that plumbers have saved. Right, but plumbers have saved more lives than doctors, because in our level of cleanliness is the biggest contributor to why we don't have those diseases. Because in countries right, because in the countries where they're still rolling out vaccinations, or, like let's say Indonesia, they still get all of these terrible diseases because they don't have good sewer systems. So, the idea that the vaccination will cover you isn't true. It's actually basically our hygiene that saved us as a kind of culture or whatever.
I mean, there's the, I think when you go to like Vietnam and stuff, like polio and all of these ones are legit, right? Like, I think those ones can really kill you, or malaria.
Yeah.
But it's funny. We were down at a market here a couple of days ago. We were talking to a guy who made this natural sunscreen, because we all know that sunscreen is awful for the environment. Like, it kills coral reef. Regular sunscreen, and it's just a bit of a scam. And anyway, he makes it out of pure coconut oil, and I think it has a factor 30 protection. Anyway, like 10 minutes into the conversation, he was like, yeah, I'm not vaccinated, or something like that. And his voice lowered, and it was kind of this whisper. Yeah. And we high-fived, and I was like, so 5 years later, we still have this like code language that we talk, and we're like this, like, this weird outlier group that we feel like we still need to be secretive. But I mean, things have changed a little bit where we're proud. And then I think when it first started, we were a bit like, I hope we've made the right decision. Now we know we've made the right decision. Yeah. Everything that we talked about is absolutely, unequivocally proven to be true.
That's the first time that I can feel proud of not being vaccinated and not vaccinating my children, because I've actually got the knowledge now. But for many years, there was no pride or arrogance in me. I was humbled and very, very quiet about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we've seen it now, like, same with your kids feeling sick. Like, I'm the same way. Like, we've got friends, they're just always sick. And the funny thing is they kind of have this amnesia about it. Because every time I talk to, say, one of my employees or something, it's always, I never get sick. I don't know what's going on. And I'll put the phone down. I'll talk to Tara. I'm like, it was like a month ago.
2 weeks ago.
A month ago, they were crippled with a flu. And do you feel the same thing? It's like this funny amnesia they have, and they say, well, I'm never sick. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, if I had a buck for every time you told me you're sick, I'd be rich.
But I think that's because they're so used to being around people that are also sick all the time that there's a level of acceptance that, okay, if you get sick once a month, that's actually quite good. Whereas I haven't been sick since March 2021, which is when I last got COVID. And a few weeks ago, I lost my voice and I wasn't feeling 100%. So I would say I was under the weather. And when that happened, I said it's been 4 years since I felt under the weather. And I'm horrified when it happens, because I'm like, I can't believe people put up with this shit. Like, not feeling 100% sucks.
Yeah.
It's intolerable, because I'm so used to feeling pretty damn good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, our home, we don't over clean. We don't disinfect everything. We don't, I have a lot of stress in my life. Most of the time, I struggled with insomnia for 10 years, and I still had this bulletproof immune system. Like, even my own family are like, dude, like, before we came here on holiday, everyone was sick. I didn't get sick.
Yeah, that's what happens to me. It's like
I feel
everyone's dropping like flies, and I'm like,
yeah,
I'm good.
Well, we were raised eating dirt, and my mum didn't sanitize shit. Everything was moldy.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Scrape the mold
I
off
used
the
to have
jam.
rocks in my mouth most of the time. I had a mouthful of pebbles.
Yeah,
Literally muddy pebbles.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the jam was always moldy.
That's because we didn't also refrigerate condiments, which is a purely North American thing.
I know our fridges in Europe are half the size.
Yeah, half the size with barely anything, no condiments in there.
Yeah. It's funny, like most people put eggs in the fridge over here, right?
Yeah.
Actually, they're totally fine if you have your own chickens to sit on the counter for ages.
I've proven, because I've lived here 17 years, and I've had my eggs in a bowl for 17 years out on the countertop, even when it's 30 degrees. And it doesn't matter if I get those eggs from Walmart, Superstore, or the local farmer's market. They stay out and we've never had food poisoning, and we've never had an issue. And people walk in and because we go through 50 eggs a week. So I'll have a massive bowl with 50 eggs in there out in the baking heat. And there's never been a problem, no matter where I buy them from.
It's this conditioning. Like Tara will cook her, like she's now just learning not to because I can't stand it when you buy like an expensive fish or meat and it's overcooked. And we were having a barbecue one time, and these Turkish people came over, and they brought sausages, and they put sausages on the barbecue, and they barbecued them for like 2 minutes. And when you cut them open, the middle was a little bit raw. And I'm like, well, you don't fuck around with sausages. And they're like, oh yeah. And they just ate it. And it's like, we've been so conditioned just to like totally, everything has to be overcooked, over-sanitized, just paranoia.
That's a very, very Canadian thing, because having come from England, then New Zealand, so in New Zealand, most people are barefoot all year round, and you'll go past a school and it's still like -2, that's about as low as it would ever get as far as cold, and a whole playground full of barefoot children. And there's some people there that they've never had a pair of shoes. So then we moved to Canada, and the first thing people say, because we still carried on walking around with bare feet here, the first thing they say is, well, what if you tread on broken glass or a syringe? And I thought, I lived in New Zealand 2 years and no one said that once, ever. It just wasn't talked about. And and then, my kids would jump in muddy puddles and play with mud. And I think there's a real fear here of germs and dirt. And they're much more fastidious when it comes to cleanliness and just general, what would you call it, like sanitization?
Yeah.
It's a very sanitized culture.
Well, speaking of sanitization, so we had friends over the other day, and we were talking, and somehow it came up that I drink my own urine.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think I've ever said it in front of, there was 3 people there that all at once, and oh my God, it took the conversation to 10. Everyone just stopped, and they all stared at me, and then they were just they were actually it was so fun. Because they were like, "You're fucking kidding me!"
Sensational.
Oh, it was so fun, and and they're like, "I'm Googling this when I get home. I'm watching YouTube's on this. This is crazy." And I've gotten so used to it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if people listen to this, they're going to be, "What the fuck? Tell me more. What you doing?" But the whole thing about urine being, from a child, it's like, wash your hands. It's dirty, dirty, dirty. And now we've learned that urine isn't dirty at all. It's actually extremely good for you, and it's like purified blood. Your
plasma, purified plasma.
Yeah, your poop is a different story.
That's waste.
That's dangerous. But now when I go to the public washroom, this kind of reconditioning of my mind not to be scared of that environment, not to be, sometimes I don't even wash my hands just in rebellion.
Yeah. Oh, that would be hugely taboo here. Yeah. I mean, I think what the paradigm shift for me when it came to drinking urine, because I haven't done it for quite a few months, but I did do it for about 6 months every morning. And once you get past the psychological barrier, like you say, of how we've been conditioned to see it as waste rather than, I think what it is poop is waste product, but urine is excess. So it's everything that your body couldn't process. And if you take supplements, you will get it through the urine, that excess, what it couldn't absorb, you can then reabsorb by drinking it again. And your body's getting a double dose of your supplementation, as well as all the plasma and the, just like the goodness that your body couldn't process the first time round.
Yeah. When I told them I put it on my skin, on my face in the morning, they just like, okay, that's too much.
My kids will check things, because if I have a tincture, they'll be like, this better not fucking be urine, mum. Because I have to test things, because we've done aged urine, we've done the spray bottle for the face.
Have you really?
But they'll pick it up and they'll check with me, and they'll be, it better not be, and I'll have to check it, because initially we tried putting it in lots of different forms for wound care, and then facial spray, and can it be used as a deodorant? You're just
my kids
trying it all.
Consistently embarrassed about that.
Yeah, your street cred just goes. Our kids are like, do not tell anyone. Do not tell any of our friends. This goes nowhere out of the house.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Amelia's like, I'm not having friends over. You drink pee and then you stand naked in front of the sun. You're so embarrassing.
And I got a mason jar, because I haven't done it. I just forgot about it, to be honest. Like, I did it for 6 months. Then I think because my situation's quite complicated at the moment, unless I'm in my zone and in my space where there's a mason jar next to the toilet and the whole thing's lined up.
Yeah.
But that mason jar, the kids won't go anywhere near it. The mason jar of death.
Yeah.
But I think what you're referring to when you talk about this guy you met yesterday who's made his own sunscreen is that there's these little pointers towards the same type of people who think if you meet someone and they don't wear shades, because you're more likely to get sunburn if you wear shades, and it's bad for your iris to wear shade. There's so much research out there about why shades are bad. So if someone says, I don't wear shades, I don't wear sunscreen, and that there's these little kind of cues that you get where you think, chances are they didn't take the vaccine as well. You can feel your way around a person based on some of their other habits.
Oh, yeah. We've got like our own little language. It's like we drop these little hints, and sometimes and then it's like, you are, yes, high fives.
I thought it's data points. I think what you do is when you meet someone, it's like little coins being put into whether they're fully buying into the mainstream narrative or not, you've got these data points that stack up, and then it comes almost undeniable. Yeah, I got so much data on this person that they've got and then you broach the big C, or the big, I don't know what you'd call it, and it's more times than not, they're all,
You just tell them that you listen to Joe Rogan. It's like a giveaway.
Oh, yeah, there's certain things that they're a dead giveaway. Yeah. But even that, that guy, Hugh Chase, he's an interrogation officer and a body language specialist who was just on Rogan. And he says there's only one thing you need in order to know whether you're in a psyop. And that one thing is, are you feeling shame about sharing your opinion, even if your opinion is nothing off the wall and crazy, you just feel silenced? She said that's all you need in order to know whether you're stuck in a psyop. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so interesting, because I realized that during those early days, you become so socially conditioned to keep your opinions to yourself, but it's a really hard barrier to break through, because society is reinforcing the psyop by you feeling like, I'm not going to say anything in this moment, because once people were saying things like we're doing our part and parroting those government approved phrases, those were other data points that basically confirmed to me it's not safe here. I can't share my thoughts.
Yeah, and then you self
edit.
What's the word? I can't remember.
Self-regulate.
So, that's a more fancy word for it.
You self-monitor. I can't remember what the word is. Yeah.
Yeah, you shut yourself up. You're just, you're silent.
Yeah.
You know,
Self-moderate. Maybe that's the word. Don't know.
yeah, it all means the same thing.
Mm.
But
So for
yeah,
you,
it's
what was
these
your
words too, right? Like when you say the word psyop or you say the word conspiracy, like these words have been so it's like
vilified?
leper. You know, you're a leper if you say those words. It's actually a conspiracy theorist is actually a really good thing. You have a
Oh.
theory that there might be something behind it. Like you just want to. You're
You
curious.
have a theory that there's a conspiracy.
Yeah. It's like that curiosity is a really good trait, because if you don't have that, then you're just simply a follower and you buy everything they're putting down. I mean, I think what became it's weird looking back, right? Like I'm kind of checking in with my emotions, talking about the subject, and I think about 3 years ago, I was way more fired up about things. It's like when I went through all the spiritual abuse. You know, you get to this point where enough time passes where you just don't care as much anymore.
Mm.
It doesn't trigger you as much as it used to.
Mm.
But when I look back on it, I remember I was excited when it first started happening, because for me, I live for this type of thing, like where it's like, it's not just go to work, come home, do the same old mundane thing. It's like, okay, now this is something real.
You're built for the apocalypse, basically.
Yeah, totally. And I remember not even, so it was like this thing started in China and it slowly filtered its way into our news cycle. And then it's a bit blurry for me, but then it was like, okay, shut things down. And I remember every morning getting up, watching the CBC, which I never would listen to anymore. But back then I trusted it, and Trudeau would come out in front of his house and talk. And there was this unifying, almost an excitement amongst the healthy, I guess. I was connected to you and Sophie and Mom. It doesn't matter where we were in the world.
Yeah,
we were all.
There was a camaraderie.
Yeah, it was like this total togetherness, and we were talking to friends. What are you doing? What do you feel? And I was talking to Tara about it. And it's like we lucky enough, we had a pool in our backyard, and it was the height of summer, I think, when it hit. And so,
March. It was early spring. Yeah.
Right. So our neighbors were just tormented by the sound of us cannonballing into the pool. We moved into
because they couldn't come over.
No, they could come over, and they were just sweating it out. And yeah, it was great. I think everyone can say it was a great family time. Some people had a horrible family time. There was divorces and all of that, but for us, it was a real moment to just stop. And
I think it was a mixed bag, because I remember you saying, "Well, your business, you thought shit." I mean,
I thought we were fucked.
It was a mixed bag, because there was real concern, but everyone was suffering. So
but there was this grace,
bond.
right? Like we got from our clients, like when we said, "Oh, we can't come because so-and-so's got a snivel." Well, if you said that now, everyone would be like, "Figure it out. I want this kitchen done." Back then, it was like, "No, totally understand. Take all the time you need."
Yeah.
So there was this beautiful kind of grace in my line of work. But we also, if your company failed, there was no judgment. It wasn't like, "Oh, you failed as a business owner,"
right?
Because everyone thought so. It was like this, like there wasn't so much stigma around your business kind of struggling. Like
it was outside of your control.
Yeah, and everyone was in the same boat. So there was this total like empathy from everybody. And as luck would have it, it was actually the best couple of years of our business. As far as, because people just suddenly thought, you know what? We've got all this extra money. We're not going to go on vacation. Let's renovate our home. So we had the most incredible, but it took a while to get to that point, because we did think it was over.
Yeah.
And then the vaccine question, like, and I remember talking about, like, I was excited too for the vaccine, because I just didn't think about it. I was like, you might have had this light bulb thing, but I didn't have that Matrix moment. And it was like, everyone was like, it would be in conversation. When the vaccine comes out, then I'm sure it'll be better.
Right.
And because I was watching mainstream news then, I didn't know about, I don't think I listened to Rogan, and I don't think all of these things, didn't listen to all that stuff. And then the vaccine, and then Tara started saying, I don't know what I feel about this vaccine. I'm like, oh, really? And I just followed her lead, and she started talking to maybe you and Aaron, our friends in Kelowna, and they were like, yeah, no, we're not getting it. And so Tara felt like okay, she went way
She's
down the
a real
rabbit hole.
researcher, isn't she? She's
a
very
real
dedicated.
Yeah, and also that maternal thing, like,
Mm.
do I want to put this in my children?
Well, you hadn't vaccinated your 2 younger kids either, had you?
No, all my older ones.
Right. Okay. So you got 4 kids. So then you think, well, why are we piling on top of this one when we haven't done what would appear to be in society the most crucial is early childhood ones?
Yeah. I mean, my
Yeah.
oldest son did get one vaccine because he wanted to go out and date girls. I'm like, oh.
Right.
So I couldn't
Yeah.
stop him. He was old enough. But
Mm.
all the other 3 haven't got any.
Mm.
It's funny because it's not funny, but Raven, my oldest one who did get vaccinated, has been deathly sick 4 or 5 times
Really?
since.
Wow.
Like he feels like he's dying. He's so sick.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
And so then they started coming in, and then it was like everything started to turn from this unity. We're all in this together, and this isn't a story that's not, I mean, it's so common. You hear this from everybody, right? And then all of a sudden it was like, if you question because I remember questioning, saying, I don't think we're going to get vaccinated, to a buddy of mine. He's like, oh, really? And I was mountain biking with my neighbor actually, and he was like, yeah, we're going to go on holiday, I think he said, like, or something like that. And I said, oh, it sucks because we're not allowed to go on holiday. We're not allowed to go on a plane. He's like, well, I wouldn't want to sit beside anyone. I don't think I told him that I wasn't getting vaccinated, but I was like,
Right.
people that don't get vaccinated can't go on planes. He's like, well, it's quite right. I wouldn't want to be on a plane with someone who isn't vaccinated. And I was like, that's when it hit me the first time, like, whoa. And I went home and told Tara, I'm like, the aggression there was real. And it's funny how you kind of forget, like, we couldn't go to any of our kids' recitals for like years.
Right.
We
I
couldn't.
know. You forget.
My daughter's graduated high school. I had to wait outside in the car. She went into this thing, got a quick picture with some flowers, and came out like the shittiest graduation ever. And so and then we had this. I think what the hardest thing for me, looking back over the last 5 years, and what I still haven't recovered from, is what it did to my friendship group. And it just, because I've had not abandonment issues, betrayal. Betrayal is one of my biggest trigger points, because I felt like that's happened to me a lot through my life, and this just like it gaslit that whole story for me. And we had a specific incident where we had this group of friends that we grew close to, like we've already talked about, through the band days, and there was this big group of people, and we would brag about how, we even created a songbook, because we'd had these crazy fire sing-alongs, and we created this big binder that had all the fire pit songs, and we would always bring this box of songs over to any barbecue or anything, right? And we had this fire pit planned for my place, and this was like 2 years into it, maybe 3 or maybe 2 years into it. So I had gone to this protest downtown, and at this point it was still like not, the lines weren't super defined. It was like people were trying to figure out which side they were on, but it wasn't super defined. So I didn't feel any shame in going down to this protest, which was simply...
What was the protest?
The protest was like, it was about the vaccine. It was like,
my body, my choice type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you've got the extreme folks there that had like big syringes on top of their trucks, and
yeah, I know.
and saying, that the vaccine had magnets in it or chips in it.
Nanobots or whatever.
Yeah, but that was like the minority. Most of those people were just like great folks. So I went downtown, and it was a hot summer day, and I just was part of this, and I was filming it. I was like, this feels amazing. Look at all these people supporting this. And I thought at that point that I was kind of in the majority. It was us against the government or something. And I posted it on Instagram thinking nothing of it. And I got a phone call from one of our friends, and she said, hey, Jobie, looking forward to tonight. Everyone's coming over. It's going to be a great time. It's our first get together for like a year or something. And she goes, I looked at your Instagram feed just now. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. She goes, I noticed you were at the protest. And I'm like, yeah. And my heart started like clinching up. I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel good.
Shit.
And she's like, I saw you weren't wearing a mask. And I'm like, no, it was a hot day. Like, oh, beautiful hot day. What? No. And she goes, yeah, I'm sorry, but we can't come tonight. And I was like, and she was kind of emotional about it too. And I said, okay, I understand. And I hung up the phone, and then it hit me like I was having a strong front, like I don't care kind of thing. Like, that's fine if that's your choice. And it just like, I was like, oh, like I just felt awful inside. Like, this is
she
yucky.
probably felt awful too.
She probably did. And the thing that really was hard for me is that I went home and told Tara that this one person wasn't showing up. And there was about 10 other people coming, and none of them showed as well, but nobody called and said, hey, we're not coming over tonight.
Wow.
It was obviously the word spread around the group. So that has never been talked about. And and then we had friends in Kelowna too that were take the same stance as us, and they would find the same thing. Our friend groups would go up to the ski hill in Kelowna, and they weren't invited to come up. So it was like this unsaid thing, right? And so you were
uninvited to things by omission.
Exactly.
They voted with their feet, basically.
And that hurt, and that scar I don't know if will heal, because I believe that forgiveness is a real thing that should happen. But to forgive someone, in my opinion, there needs to be an apology. Like, how can I forgive you? I guess I can forgive you if you don't apologize. Like Jesus did that from the cross, right? He said, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. Yeah. But I'm not Jesus.
Yeah.
And I feel that there needs to be, from my heart, to be completely open back up again to the deepness that we had before. I feel there needs to be, you know what? Because in my opinion, it's like, I don't expect people to say, yeah, like if you want to get the vaccine and you want to do it, I'm like, do what you want, fill your boots, you know?
But don't
if you
impose it on me.
If you see the Canadian Prime Minister saying that we're part of a fringe minority, that we are the cause of all these deaths, we are the cause of the spread. If you see that on television, a true friend, in my opinion, would say, hey, man, I don't know, I don't agree with you not getting the vaccine. Like, but I don't like what they're talking about you on television, and I'm behind, like, I love you. And I'm like,
yeah.
And the only time I ever heard that from anyone was like, pulled my truck up outside the gym where I work out. And this guy came around the corner on his Harley, and he pulled over. Hey, Jobie, how's it going? And this is when it was still, things are really churning, right? And this guy called Armando. I just met him at the gym. We never hung out outside the gym. It was very just like, hey, how's it going? And he said, the vaccine came up, and he says, bro, I got 2 jabs. I regret it. He goes, I totally support your decision, man. If I could do this again, I wouldn't have got jabbed. And I don't care if you get jabbed or not jabbed, I'm with you. Like,
that is so amazing. That's all you need.
And I just was like, magic. Like, this guy doesn't really know me that well, but he said, I'm arm in arm with you.
Wow.
And none of my friends, it makes me feel emotional talking about it, because none of my close friends, except for the ones that were clearly not making the decision we made, and we were really bonded, because we were kind of like, you really bonded with those people because you're like trying to figure it all out. We all had children, and we all wanted to do the right thing for our kids, and we were trying to navigate this. So you got deep really fast, right?
Yeah.
But my larger friend group, there's never been a conversation about it. And we still hang out, and we still laugh and joke and play music and do this thing. But there's a place that we just don't go, and there's a big elephant in the room that's probably gotten more and more into the background. Like, there's a lot of love there still, but it's something's missing. And for me, it's like, you bit me, and I don't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
And so we can be friends, and we can, but when push comes to shove, if there's a real crisis,
they'll drop you like a hotcake.
I'm not going to be turning to you, and I should be, because you're my closest friends. But I'm not going to turn to you because I don't fucking trust you anymore, because I feel betrayed. Not that I feel like I want them to say, I wish I hadn't got the vaccine. I don't care about that. I'm more like a true friend would say, if I said to you tomorrow, hey, Abigail, I'm coming out of the closet, I'm gay. And I knew that was, as my sister or my friend, you would stand by me probably. Like, I don't really know what you're going through. I don't understand it. I think you're crazy. Your family's going to fall apart, but I love you, and I'll always be here for you. Like, that's all we want, right?
But I would say, based on their behavior, I think what the grip of fear, I think what the reason they dropped you the way they did is because fear was overriding any bond or, that's what's different. Like if you came out gay, I would support, there would be no fear element. And I think what was shocking to me is how susceptible and how much people absorbed the fear. And that fear made enemies of friends, because ultimately it was each man for himself. Like, dude, I love you, man, but the reason your friend called up is that fear just permeated society to where people were doing really not pleasant things to people they loved and would snitch on them and
crazy.
And when I look back now, I think what I sometimes forget in that I got to a point late 2021 where things really started to get nasty, where we didn't know what the end of the story would be. We didn't know that these things would lift. We thought, oh my God, this is it. This is society's going to be like the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and it's just going to carry on. Because I was in fight mode, and I think that the biggest thing that I often forget, because I'll reflect on some of my behavior and I'll think, why did I act that way? Why was I more aggressive at that time and worked up? And I think the reason is A, we didn't know how bad things were going to get, and they got pretty damn bad for us, because there was a point for many months where the only place we could go to here was the supermarket with self-checkout and Walmart with self-checkout, because the gym was not an option, restaurants, theatres, no, my kids couldn't. Literally, the only place we could go was the supermarket. We couldn't get into
the fucking
pharmacies.
Passports. Remember that? The vaccine passports?
We couldn't do anything or go anywhere. We couldn't go to the mall. We couldn't go clothes shopping. My son had a tick, and in order to get into ER, they wanted proof of vaccination for him to just get his tick checked out. And I remember how much thick skin I had to adopt, and it was kind of like us against the world, and it's not a pleasant way to live. I didn't enjoy having to go into a supermarket, even the supermarket, because I refused to wear a mask. When I found out the science behind masks, then I felt a sense of responsibility to not comply with mask wearing as well. So it wasn't just, I'm not vaccinated and I don't have a vaccine passport. Is once I really realized that was all virtue signaling, the mask was all theatre, then what this was about was me not being a people pleaser.
Totally.
And this wasn't about anything other than my personal journey in people pleasing, and how if I caved into this now that I've got the knowledge, I said to my children once, I can't remember, in 2021, when I'd figured out for sure that masks don't work and all of this is theatre. And we sat outside Walmart, which was one of the only stores we could go to, sadly. And all the markets were closed down, the farmers markets, everything. And I sat in the car with them and I said, you've got two options. Either you sit in the car and wait for me to come out, or if you want to come in there with me, because they just wanted to go places, just there was nothing to do. I said, you are not allowed to come with me unless you leave your masks behind. Because I said, if you submit to this pressure, this weaponized, the government have weaponized our need to people please. That is a beautiful gift where we want to, what was the word? It's the weaponization of our goodness. That people generally want
do the right thing.
And the government have weaponized that. And if you submit to that, you're going to spend the rest of your life people pleasing. And as someone who struggled with people pleasing and the need for approval, I knew, like 40 years in, how much that's been a struggle for me to break out of. And I said to him, this is a key moment in your life where you're being conditioned right now by society and by the government to jump hoops in order to get the approval of others. And if you don't stand up to this now, you'll never stand up to it. You'll spend the rest of your life trying to please other people and avoiding disapproval. Because when we would go, and they decided to come with me, they're like, yeah, okay, we'll come. So we go in there without masks on. And I was so used to being chased around the store by managers. And it's horrible. I didn't enjoy it.
I know. It is so draining. It's
my God. You kind of go in there and put your kind of armadillo skin on and go, harden yourself towards the world, look down, don't make any eye contact. And this was our local Walmart, so they knew me. And we walked in there, and the doorman said, excuse me, you can't come in here without a mask. And I started my spiel, which is, you can't discriminate against me because there's self-checkout. The minute you put self-checkout in here, I can check myself out. I don't need your service. I got my whole thing like,
yeah.
You
and he
can't
just rolling his
discriminate.
eyes, saying, "Oh, fuck."
And then the manager at the back of the store said, don't even bother with her. I've already had that argument. Just leave her alone. We just walked in, and I remember, because sometimes I think, why was I so kind of hardened and aggressive? And it was because I was in fight mode every minute. I was chased out of the liquor store. I was chased out of the soup, and you end up being in fight mode and having your little spiel. And why did I do all of that? Is because I knew personally that once the science didn't make any sense, or the, pseudoscience, and the real science said none of these things are working anyway, and the arrows on the floor are nonsense, and it's just a humiliation, and it's a kind of test to see how much we'll comply so they can humiliate us more in the future, whatever the thing is. Now I'm responsible. With that knowledge, I'm responsible to not live my life looking for the approval of others. And that's what this is really about for me.
Yeah. Well, I think, I struggle with this too. It was like, people will say, well, just do it. It's just stop being such a trouble. Like, why don't you just put a mask?
Difficult.
Or people say, like, just put it, even if you don't think it's worth it, it's not going to hurt you to put it on. And I remember hearing Rogan talk about this too. He was like, I used to wear a mask just to make everyone happy. I didn't care. I knew it wasn't working, but it's like, fuck, okay, just don't be the problem. But to me, it's like there's a real lack of people with, like, it's the principle of it. And it's, it was like, I owe it to myself to be honest with myself. Like, I'm not, like, this is the harder path. Like, when you walk into a store without a mask on, you're choosing the harder path, right? And it's not fun. And I think, like, rebellion is not, like, when you're doing that, it's not easy and it's not fun. It would be much easier to put a mask on. But I felt like I was just being a con to myself, like a liar.
Yeah.
And that to me, one story I have is like, it's funny remembering all this because you kind of forget, right? Like, so
you don't want to remember. It sucked.
my friends wanted to go to Mexico because they were like, we're just getting out of here. Because in Mexico, like, we're here right now, and I'm talking to locals, and they're like, yeah, tons of people flocked here because people didn't give a fuck. It's borderline third world in parts of Mexico, and people don't. When you're struggling to make ends meet, you're not going to comply to all that crap. And honestly, they don't have I think I've seen 2 cops the whole time I've been here. Yeah. They just can't enforce stuff.
Right.
And so there's so much more freedom, which I absolutely love because I hate rules. And so they were like, okay, we want to go to Mexico. And she had all these other friends that wanted to fly and do stuff, but we had to fly. You had to have this vaccine passport. And so they came down. There was somehow through the black market, like the dark web or whatever, you could find these doctors that would fake inject you and then give you a vaccine passport. So they came down, and it would cost you a lot. Like, you had to pay like, $1,000 or whatever, because they were putting their whole license on the line to do this. But a lot of doctors, by principle, knew this was wrong and didn't mean anything. Yeah. But they also needed to keep their license to feed their kids. Yeah. And so this carload of folks came down, and one of the guys couldn't make it. So he asked if I would pretend to be him and get the job.
And it gets sketchier and sketchier.
Yeah. So we sat in the car. We sat outside this clinic, right? And they're like, okay, this is the story that you're going to So I had his ID, his driver's license. I clearly didn't look like him. But the nurses, the ones who knew, they didn't give a fuck. They were like, they didn't agree, and they were in rebellion mode too, but they were trying to keep their jobs. So, and we walk into this clinic, say, we're here to get our vaccines. You have to say it out loud. Okay. And I don't know what the code was that they knew that we ones that didn't want the actual jab. They shuffled us into this room, and this is crazy. So we sat down in this room. She made us roll up our sleeves. She made us sign the paper. She filled a fake syringe full of fake saline or something, and she pretended to jab us in the arm.
Yep.
She took off her gloves and put it in the garbage, and she did all of that because she thought she was being taped.
Wow.
And I was like, this is unbelievable, like so Orwellian, unbelievable. Yeah. And so we walked out of there, and then they got there, and it turned out, I think about like a month or so later, that woman got her license pulled, which is crazy. And what bravery, right? And I feel like, that kind of, I felt disappointed in my friends, in a lot of my friends, that kind of like the principle of it didn't ring loud. Like to me, I don't like injustice. I'm like, it's the principle. It
really revealed who had balls of steel and who didn't. And it was really interesting to see where the dust settled on that, because it was quite unexpected people who had the balls and I get it. Some people literally as providers couldn't lose their livelihood, and it broke their heart to get the vaccine, and they still to this day feel cut up about it.
Yeah.
And they have my full sympathy.
Yeah. And it's not only, I might have poison in my blood. It's like that thing, right? I lied to myself. I lied. You know what I mean?
They betrayed themselves.
I betrayed themselves. Yeah, that betrayal.
Yeah.
And I think it really shone a light on how susceptible we are to obeying people in white coats. They've done those experiments where if you wear like a Viz vest, one of those street, those road working vests, you can go into an airport, and they've shown hidden cameras where people have gone right in past security. Right. Because we have this it's entrenched in us from childhood.
Symbols
anyone wearing
of
a uniform, anyone wearing a uniform, obey them, do what they say. Yeah. And I think, like, I'm so proud of how you taught your children, like that thing outside of Walmart. I'm like, that is fucking amazing. Like our kids, it became this conversation now, it's like, so our kids, we would go walking and be like, we had this motto, it's like, if a rule doesn't make sense, break it and don't get caught.
Oh.
And it's like this kind of rebelliousness that I think is to Tara's parents, they think it's like really irresponsible to be teaching your kids that, but I don't at all. I think it's like question authority all the time. And if you don't get caught and the rule doesn't make any sense at all, walk along, So in Mexico, it's interesting because everyone's trying to make $1, right? So we go to this beach yesterday, and this guy is standing at the gate, and we park outside the gate. So he's making 100 pesos to have cars parked inside the gate. And they want to think you to think that your car is going to get broken into. So I park outside the gate, and I walk in, and he goes, no, can't go. And I don't speak Spanish, so it's pretty difficult. And he's like, you can't go to the beach. I'm like, it's public beach. And these other guys walking up, they're expats, right? And they're half drunk, and like, fuck him, go down here. And it's like, but there's this thing, right? It's like a lot of people like, oh, I'm sorry. He's behind this little kiosk, and he looks like he's wearing army fatigues. Okay, here's 100 pesos. And he's just laughing as you walk to the beach. He just made 100 pesos off you. But a lot of us do that. We kind of clench up around authority, and people, and I still have that knee-jerk reaction. It's like, oh, you know more than me. I obey you blindly.
I think those moments, especially with our kids, certainly mine, it was such a pivotal moment in their formative years that has shaped just their sense. Like they'll say at school, my teachers will be talking, but I don't believe what they're saying. They'll talk about 9/11, and they'll talk about basically political things, which they shouldn't really be talking about in school in one way or another. They shouldn't even be saying that they're anti-Trump at school or pro anything when it comes to politics. But in the era of the vaccine, they were pushing that at school. And one day, my 12-year-old, they were making posters about, doing your part and how can you do your part during lockdown? And she just wrote on a big poster, "We will never surrender." And I thought, and she proudly put it up there. And I thought, what the hell would have the teacher thought of that? Because awesome. in her mind, as a 12-year-old, that was her view of all of this. It's like, we're motherfuckers, we're not going down. And it was her against the system. But that was the moment where for them, their eyes were open to corruption, and that, oh, by the way, your government doesn't wish you well. Your government wants you
Yeah.
to live a long, unhealthy life. That's the agenda. That's
Well,
why there's corn syrup and things and fructose and,
Yeah.
fluoride.
You're a customer, not a patient, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Amelia went to school just a couple of weeks ago, and there was a nurse set up with a little tent on site. She's there almost once a week now. And Amelia came home and said, yeah, this nurse coaxed us over and started telling us this like story. Like once there was a person, and they tried to entrap Amelia into, and then at the end of the story, it's like, do you want to get your vaccine? We can give it to you right now. And her friend just rolled up her sleeve and fucking threw the jab in. And Amelia came home and I just high-fived her. I'm like, yeah, good for you. But the entrapment that this nurse was doing was telling them a story that made them feel like obliged to do it.
Yeah.
But, that story of your daughter standing up, I remember saying this and feeling this. I'm like, all the movies that we watch, that we cheer, Gladiator,
the underdog,
Braveheart, right? It's this guy that stands up and says, fuck you to the system and gets killed for doing it. We stand up in our seats and cheer, and our hearts are beating with passion. You're right. These movies really move us, right? And we're like the champion that said Robin Hood.
Yeah. Well, every blockbuster is about the underdog.
Yeah, this hero's journey, and a lot of it is standing up to authority. And yet, when push comes to shove in the real world, most people did not do that and did not applaud when people did that. So it's this weird.
It's a reveal.
Yeah,
it's like
a full-on reveal. It's like, okay, so you like the movie, but in real life, when push comes to shove, and you stand to actually lose something, and you stand to lose the like. I had friends of mine that just said, "Hey, man, I don't care either way. I just want to travel and eat in restaurants." I'm like, so you're really willing to do this thing that could be life-changing just so you can have a fancy meal and go to another country? Like, really? That's how weak you are? Really?
Well, also, a lot of people genuinely believed this was as severe as the media was telling them that this, if you think about, we're only able to talk like this because we did so much research to try and get under, and most people who didn't bother putting in the time, a lot of them will probably say, oh, I'm really glad. I know people who've had 8 or 9 jabs because they get it done every 6 months, and there's no regret in them, and they still feel they did the right thing, and they still feel that COVID is a really serious, disease. So unless you've really pulled back the curtain on, and they would think the thought that we think this is agenda driven is ridiculous, and that our notions that this is government driven to get us to comply, and they would think they would say we're the crazies, we are off the wall, and I appreciate the fact that even though I don't disagree, I don't agree with them, there are still people who are locked in to that.
And that's the way we survive, right? Like, we tell ourselves what we're doing is right. Like,
and you see what you want to see, so you focus on, but I know a 30-year-old who died of COVID, and you don't focus on, let's research how were they treated in hospital, were they put on a ventilator, were they given ivermectin? If most people just don't want to put the time in to find out the story behind the story.
Well, why
which
would
is
you?
What we did.
Why would you? If you stood up on the street on the corner of this, as it were, within your friendship group and says, what I'm doing is right and what you're doing is wrong. The human ego does not like to say I was wrong. And so there's enough information out there to bolster your belief. And that's just
either way, because we're so siloed.
We're so siloed, and we're so ego driven, and our ego, and so it's willful blindness, right? And I mean, if you're looking in the right place,
you'll find someone to confirm your beliefs.
Totally. But everything that we believed and said was happening that sounded so tinfoil hatty is now unequivocally proven. If you said it was in a Wuhan lab, not in the market, you were a fucking lunatic. And now it's normal to know that. Adverse events, all this shit. I mean, I think, looking back on the whole 5 years too, one of the biggest moments for me that took it from maybe a 5 to a 10 was the protest. And I mean, that was like, to me, that's a historical moment in history, in Canadian history, and almost the whole world talk about it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
in my life and where it took my emotions and my friendships, it took it through the roof.
Yeah.
Because I think one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't go to that convoy. I
Yeah.
felt the pull to go, and I have friends on the island now, because when we moved to Vancouver Island, there's a lot more people who are what we call awake. That's kind of our
Yeah.
code word, is awake, who went there and said it was incredible, and they took their children there. And
wow. It was historical. It really was.
I remember that, just like watching the YouTubes of these. I remember it being really, it was the thick of winter, right? And I remember them filming the highway, and it was like just nothing and just fog and a couple people on the bridge with flags, and all of a sudden you saw a semi truck, and then one and two, and then bloody
hundreds
of
hours
them,
and hours of it, just
miles of trucks. And the funny thing was, on the mainstream media, they would show like a cluster of 10, and people bought that, and I just felt this such a like it felt like we were going to war now. It was like, these are my people. This is real. This is, I was so 110% in behind that.
Yeah.
And so proud. I felt so proud. And I went to the convoy at one of our border crossings, because we've got, in Vancouver, there's lots of borders to the States, and same for you, right? And I went to one of those, and it was just this Mardi Gras. And it was like, oh, everyone's my people. Like, we're all, and
no
everyone,
shame.
big smiles. Everyone thought it was a whole all rednecks. No, it wasn't. There was like all kinds of walks of life, and everyone was like, felt so good to see people eye to eye that believe the same thing. And at that point, it was just like, stop telling us what to do and let us go about our work, and let these truckers do their job without getting vaccinated. And a lot of them were vaccinated. It was the principle, right?
We just want our life back now. We want to be left alone. I think it was the first time we didn't feel alone. So initially in lockdown 2020, there was that camaraderie, because the jab wasn't out yet. There was no division. There was a sense of togetherness, even though we were isolated at home. And then for 2 years, or however long it was before the trucker convoy, there was division, there was fight mode, there was isolation from your friends, there was a breakdown in relationship. It was a horrible, horrible time that we went through. If you didn't comply, I imagine if you did comply, a lot of this stuff didn't happen. It was less horrid. And then the trucker convoy happened, and finally there was masses of us. We're not alone. We're not isolated. There's literally millions of us.
And the bravery of the team of like Tamara Lynch, who got time in jail for what she did. And the purity of her heart, like, just never, I mean, she would say to people, like, if you're not in Canada, we had these flags that said, fuck Trudeau. And she said, you guys shouldn't fly those. Like, he has children. Like, that's going to be hurtful for his kids to watch. I'm like, what? You're the leader of this convoy, and everyone's speaking out against you, and you're saying that? It's just like, what?
Yeah, amazing.
And I remember feeling like that was the first time I jumped on Instagram and started putting videos out. And I own a business, and so I thought this could really hurt me, because if my customers see this, I'm sure most of my customers are into the jab and everything, and I could lose business. But I felt this such a deep sense of like the principle of it. Like, you have to stand up and not, like, I felt this, like, there's a pull to like just cover your head in shame and support it in secret. And I felt I had that equal, not resentment, but just perplexed at folks that didn't get jabbed, but really held their light under, they were lukewarm about it. Because they were like, I'm secretly not into this. But I felt like this is not a time, like, I felt so pushed to stand up and say, this is what I believe. Because
I think also we didn't know what was coming and whether it was going to get worse and worse and more serious. And in the end, we had to choose, is this the hill we're willing to die on? And it turns out, this is the hill.
Yeah, because if you're exercising your right to freedom of speech, and people are saying that we do live in a freedom of speech country, then you'll be like, okay, well, fuck it. I'll talk my mind then and see what you say about it. And the truth is, they didn't like it. No one liked it.
No.
But that's, if we truly do live in a free country, I felt like I felt super compelled to just, I didn't care if anyone watched it. I just was like, I have to do this and not be the one that's quietly supporting.
For me, I did it not to the same degree that you did it, but I felt the same sense of, I've got to put my money where my mouth is in this moment, as I'll be a hypocrite And
Yeah.
things were hotting up so much. It was getting so bad. And by that time, it had been months since we could go anywhere. You know, like we said, couldn't go to restaurants. It felt like our world was becoming so small, and that the seriousness of what is going to happen next, we didn't know. And I sometimes forget that we were in like, right, we got to buy a cow and fill our freezer. We got to start doing prepper stuff because it was getting so bad. And in that
I bought
moment,
guns
yeah,
because
I mean,
Trudeau
we
was
were
starting to
buying
lock down on
bullets.
that.
I started researching buying bullet makers. Like, could you buy a bullet making machine and buy copper? Because things just looked so bad for us as far as being shunned in society, and people's real rejection of us, just on every level. It was so bad. And our kids had been wearing masks in schools. Even though I wasn't wearing masks and they weren't wearing masks everywhere, they still had to wear them in schools or they'd be expelled. And I wasn't ready to homeschool. So I felt like this is the hill, man. I backed myself onto that hill unexpectedly in a way. And I was like, oh, it turns out this is the hill I'm willing to die on. Every time I pictured myself jumping the hoops of what the government had said, I felt so repulsed by that. I pictured myself getting the jab or putting on a mask or any kind of compliance, because there was always new things coming out, new rules. The repulsion, because I knew what I knew and I'd educated myself enough that I felt confident in what I knew, that I knew I couldn't walk out anything other than what I knew to be true at this point. And it wasn't that I was courageous. I didn't feel courageous. It was that there was no other option for me because the alternative was so repulsive to me.
Yeah.
You know,
like looking at yourself in the mirror and knowing that you just you held your light under a bushel and you just kind of, I mean, it's like when in Jesus, you know, at the end people scuttled away because they were afraid.
Yeah.
But some of them didn't, you know, but it's like most of them were just like, yeah, I like him, but not that much. I'm out.
Pretty much everyone, I think. Everyone.
Yeah.
Maybe
they
not
did,
his
didn't
mother.
they? Yeah. But it was a moment, right? It was like a moment where it was like, now's your choice. It was like we were put up to the line and it was like, make your choice. And we were and it was literally felt like that we had a decision to make. And people...
I've got to say, I was self-employed. Would I have been different if I had not been self-employed?
Yeah.
You know, even then, I'm like, I can't say that if I was the provider, the sole provider for my family, and I was an employee, I might have folded. I think I would have just got a fake vaccine and I would have done absolutely everything I could to not do it.
I had a friend that was a doula and she got kicked out of the hospitals and it got real for them. Like, you know, she but again, it's like some people, if you push them, they'll push back hard. And if you push them again, they'll be like, it becomes almost irrational. You're like, I'm willing to go to the till for this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what, like, you know, when you hear these stories about people in I heard a story the other day about these people in like Afghanistan who were Christians. I think it was on a Tucker Carlson show. And they were just laborers at a building site. And they got like arrested and said, all you got to do is renounce your faith and just say you're Allah, and then we'll let you go. And they said no, and they got beheaded.
Wow.
And it's like, what? There's something magical in a human being. Not all human beings, but there's something magical that is like, it is like this tinder that's sitting there, and then someone sticks a match to it, and it doesn't matter how much you torture them, they are not going to fold. And it's not in every man. Like some people just don't have it. And I'm not criticizing people for not having it. But when you're the torturer and you're like, dude, all you got to do is just say and how many times? It's that same thing, you know, like in these movies, just kneel down and kiss the ring. And all of his mates are nudging him saying, just do it, man. We know you don't really believe it. And like in Braveheart, remember how all he had to do? And he was like, no. And they like pulled his entrails out. And that's a true story. Infuriating to the torture. It's like, I don't want to do this to you, man. Just fucking fake it. Yeah. And there's this beautiful thing that's in some humans that once you put that match to that tinder, it's like there is nothing you can do to change that man's mind, because it's the principle of you telling him to do something he doesn't want to do.
And I think part of that, a lot of people have that about protecting their children. Almost everyone would do that. And for me, this situation was just that. I was trying to install into my children the blueprint for life. I saw it as, if you can understand this, you understand everything about the mechanism of how our society works. This is how big this is. And it's shaped how they view life now, because they really do not know, they believe, no, our government doesn't want the best for us. They understand how it can gaslight and wants you to do badly. I'll say to them, we'll talk about taxes, and I'll say the government doesn't want us to flourish. It doesn't wish you well. It doesn't want, if you look at the potholes in our road and how difficult life is becoming, don't ever think the government wants the best for you. It wants you to live a long, unhealthy life where you're dependent on pharmaceutical products and you pay your taxes so that it can line its own pockets. And don't think for a second that when it says we're doing this for your safety or for your benefit, you never believe that that's true. And they've seen it in real time, and now it's shaped how they view. And it was funny because after everything lifted, I thought, okay, we all want to forget that whole shit show. I wonder how it's going to reveal itself in other ways. And how it revealed itself was 2 years ago when we had these forest fires in the spring. It was in May, I don't know what year, 2 years ago. And they introduced rules like you can't go for a dog walk. In fact, no one can walk in the forest because there'd been these forest fires that these young punks had started over here they'd lit tires on fire, and it got out of control. And what was really interesting and kind of what was revealing is that instantly people complied and started snitching on other people. If they saw someone walk into the forest on a dog walk, they would call the cops would show up and find them. And what it showed to me is that conditioning that we went through during lockdown has produced in our psyche, for most of society, an instant reflex. Oh, we know what we're doing here. Oh yeah, snitching, compliance,
muscle reflex,
following the
right?
rules. And they were so readily willing to jump those hoops. And it appeared legitimate, like, okay, we don't want, but most sensible people, we all knew how the fire started. It was teenagers who, it was on video, it was on TikTok. But regular, normal, responsible people were no longer able to go for a stroll. But obviously the government dress it up in safety and convenience, and this is for the greater good. And I saw then how conditioned we all are, because that reflex response was instant.
Yeah, it was like muscle memory.
Completely. So it's all just still there. All the ingredients are ready to bake whenever they want to activate another moment of humiliation, which is definitely...
It's weird, right? It's like, I remember that feeling when I moved back to England after Dad died, and I was like really, really in this cultic church experience, and just locked in, and to a point where I was my marriage was on the line to my other wife. And a year in England kind of detoxed me, and I came back to Kamloops, and I walked into the church that I'd been a part of, and it was like, it is like seeing the Matrix. I just saw it was like I was watching a charade. This is like a charade. And wow. I used to think it was real. So it's like going to the theater and believing that what you're watching is totally real. And then one day someone tells you, no, it's just a play. And when you see it, I remember I was like, when they would get up and do like the offering and said, we want to just have a moment of silence for our brothers in Uganda who are going through such and such. And it was like 5 minutes silence. And I was looking around the room, and I'm like, half the people are thinking about, half aren't. And then okay, let's get on to our other thing. And I just, it was so blatantly obvious to me. I walked out of there and I was like, I can't be part of this. It's all fake. It's all fake.
Bullshit.
Yeah, it's just people going through the motions and feeling better about themselves when they walk out because they did the right thing of going to church and singing and giving their offering and tithing half their income and all that shit. And ever since then, I can't walk in. I just can't buy it. I just don't buy it anymore. I can't unsee what I saw. And the
weird thing is, I was thinking today about how, because people I know still do posts on Instagram about lockdown and the science, and, and my feeling is when I was in the Christian realm, an atheist could never have persuaded me not to be a Christian any more than a Christian can persuade an atheist not to be an atheist. The arguments don't work.
No.
I feel like for me, leaving Christianity was about a sense of almost waking up to the theatre of it all, but also a sense of disgust about what I saw in Christianity in the church became
hypocrisy and abuse.
So appalling. The behaviour was so appalling. But an atheist could never have woken, because when people say, oh, you can bring someone round to, let's say you've got someone listening to this who believes the mainstream media, I don't think any amount of arguing can awaken someone. What you needed when you were coming out of that cult was a decompression time, distance, like examples of people loving each other outside of religion or whatever it was, and then the hypocrisy and the abuse. It's like these tremors, and then one day there's a collective earthquake and there's a massive crack in the earth, and you realize that's the awakening moment. But you can't be argued into that awakening. I feel like you have to be. For me, it was a sense of disgust for Christianity. I was so appalled at how people were treated. But it wasn't just one time. It had to be years of mistreatment, abuse, lack of care, abuse of money. Like because I was so brainwashed, it took a lot and many years.
Yeah. And also, for me, it was like, it's not only I was walking away from the church, because the church and God were intertwined. So if you walked away from the church, you're walking away from God. And they say spirituality is more intimate than sexuality, right? It's like, I remember them teaching you at church, if you talk spiritual talk to a girl, it's even deeper than being physical with a girl, because it's like it's like what happens after you die. It's like more intimate. And we would always be like, I don't know. But, it is a big thing when you think about your maker and what happens after death. And it's like you felt like they brainwashed us into believing that walking away from this institution was also walking away from the blessing of God.
Well, also
so
you're walking away from eternal life.
Yeah, eternal life, the whole ball of wax, right? And it was all or nothing. And so no wonder we were petrified, because you just think, okay, next week it will be better. Next week it will get better. I'm sure it will get better. Yeah. It's like being in a dysfunctional, abusive relationship from the outside exactly looking in. You're like, why don't you leave the guy? He's punching you in the face. And they go back.
You have to get to a point where you say, I'd rather be alone than be in this. Yeah. And that's the same with leaving Christianity. I would rather not go to heaven than tolerate. I would rather gamble on that thing than tolerate the way I'm being treated. Yeah, but you have to get so desperate.
Or be part of something that in your heart isn't right. Like that was the same thing with the COVID. It was like lying to yourself. Like I just can't do that.
But we had done that in Christianity, and I think there was a thread there where that awakening, that's why those patterns started to become, the pattern recognition was like, I've actually experienced this before in the form of religion.
Right.
Which feels like a psyop. You can't talk about certain things. You have to all believe together in this one thing. And it's like group think.
Yeah.
There was these, and I do think that set us up for disillusionment with what was going on in society as a whole, because we'd already come out of a cult-like situation and experience being ostracized, facing being alone and rejected by a community. There was familial traits that I pieced together, I think, subconsciously. Like all of this is deeply subconscious, or even leaving a relationship. It's all got that similar feel to it, where at the end, you have to stand up tall, open the door and just walk out and go, I would rather face the unknown and die on that hill than tolerate what I'm going through here. And to me, what we went through with lockdown was just another version of that. Oh, now we're doing it on a governmental scale. It's like you've got the macro scale in your relationships or the micro scale, and then the macro is cosmos. It just gets bigger and bigger. Because I think what happened with the trucker convoy is the curtain was being pulled back and the mask was falling off the government. And we were like, oh shit.
Yeah,
this
like when
is huge.
the aggression that they had at the end, like when there was this big standoff between the police and the protesters who were clearly peaceful. Like anyone who believes that was an unpeaceful neo-Nazi redneck protest, you need to get your head checked out. You really need to do your research. I've got no patience for you. You're fucking wrong. I mean, it was the most beautiful, and it's mentioned around the world. I mean, people in different countries. I think in Brazil they did truck convoy that was all modeled on it. In Holland, and and when we saw the police standing off your car.
Yes, my battery's about to die.
Oh.
What I need to do, you might need to cut this out. I need to start the car and start charging my phone and put you on speaker.
Oh, it's still recording for me.
It says it stopped recording for me. Now it's recording again, maybe?
Yeah, it'll be fine. I've got it.
Okay. So probably another 5-10 minutes and then I'll need to go.
Yeah. I don't know where I was going.
You were talking about the trucker convoy, the standoff between the police and the...
Oh, yeah. And when that started, I remember being, like, I remember Tara and I both having moments where we were like, we need to step away from this. Like, it was so intense because we felt like we were there with those people. And I remember, you probably felt the same thing. We were just like, we need to have a day off of not looking at but you felt like if you didn't look at YouTube and watch it, you were walking away from your brothers in arms. I mean, it was like a brothers in arms moment. And I remember... But
it felt like it was the only thing that mattered. It was so important to us because we didn't know what was going to happen next.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't know if Civil War was going to break out. Like, you just didn't know.
And I still think it was massively important. It was pivotal. Just the fact that we did that, is so important.
And that all the mandates dropped afterwards.
Yeah.
It did what it was meant to do, which no one gives credit. Like, mostly you don't hear the credit for that.
No. Yeah, and I mean, when there was that standoff, I mean, it was like beautiful, right? Like no aggression from anybody, and the cops just like beat the shit out of people, arrested people. I mean, the stories, they arrested people, put them in buses, drive them outside the city limits and drop them off. Like they knew there was they couldn't put any charges on these folks.
Their heart wasn't in it.
No. And I remember because of the emotion that was built up over that, I don't know how long the convoy went on for, but it felt like 2 or 3 weeks. And I was on Gambier, and a close friend of mine was there who was very much believing the opposite of what I believed. And we got into a few talks about it. And I remember seeing him on the beach, and he saw my face. He's like, "What's going on? Are you okay?" I said, "Man, I'm just like, because at that point it was in real time. The cops were being aggressive and beating people and pushing back and cornering everybody. And I said, yeah, what they're doing to these peaceful protesters in Ottawa, I'm having such a hard time with it." And he just shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, they shouldn't have gone."
Wow. And
I just looked at him, and I'm not a super confrontational guy. And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I said that, and I shouted my feelings. I was like, very clearly. But he just stared at me, and in bewilderment, almost also a bit shocked about how much passion was inside me. And it was actually beautiful because he came back and he hugged, and he said, "Can I give you a hug?" He said, I don't agree with you, but my friendship to you is more important. And that was a beautiful moment, but I'll never forget that. It's just how pivotal that moment was. The convoy was such a huge thing.
Yeah. But to this day, I think a lot of people would see it as a right-wing extremist protest that was violent and disrespectful and horrid, and a moment of shame for Canada. It's just, that's where you realise, and Brett Weinstein goes on about this, there are different people in this world who think so differently from us that they're different species. It feels like are we on the same planet? Are we both human? In that they've been so siloed, and we have too, I suppose. And all I see on my thread is things that are really in line with my beliefs. I've got RFK every few seconds. I've got all of the things that and these other people are getting all of the things that the algorithm tailors to their beliefs. And you
crazy.
realize, oh, we live on the same planet, but we are on a different, I suppose if it was an Xbox game, we're on a different game. We're playing a completely different game.
Yeah, it's true. And I think people also think that I think they think in their heads, oh, but if this was Hitler or if this was a dictator that was like Stalin or something, then for sure we'd be protesting. But people don't seem to understand it. No, it was a moment like that. And
then you'd get shamed by saying, how dare you compare it to the to the
I know.
Holocaust.
But I think that people romanticize those other historical moments and think, no, people did exactly the same thing. They ratted out their neighbors. Yeah. But looking back, and I think that, when we're dead and gone, the history books will tell the truth. And it hopefully, if the history books don't get manipulated, people will see that it was a moment. I think what I've realized is the history books, and as well as Hollywood movies, so manipulate what true history is like that sadly these things do get lost, and that there's the true history is very different from what gets put in the history books. Yeah. Well, like history only tells the story of the winners, not the losers, the conquerors.
And who it's written by, if it's like funded by the Rockefellers, you realize the Pentagon.
Funded by the Romans.
Well, the Pentagon has a whole Hollywood budget for funding movies. And I watch Netflix now and I go, this is social conditioning. My skepticism since then, and I'll say that to the kids, is like, okay, well, this is social conditioning. So that's why we're seeing more supernatural. A lot of this is just easing us into another sense of belief and acceptance for whatever they want to then put on us. So the saddest part is, I think the history books will paint that whole thing in a very poor light.
Probably.
And that unless you were there and it's like a storytelling handed down, it will be really misconstrued and twisted.
Yeah, because it was a rare occasion when the whole world, it was the same for everybody on the world, right? So unless you were in like Sweden or something, the whole world was in lockstep. And you were maligned over the world if you believed against it.
English, anything that was, Australia, New Zealand, any English-speaking country was in lockstep, and then most of Europe. So that was a big chunk.
Well, we're getting to the end of it. How do we wrap this anniversary beautiful talk about a beautiful time? I guess 5 years later, we're still alive.
Yeah. And it shaped in a massive way how we've raised our kids, our worldview. To me, those moments have changed me forever. Like we've talked in the past about how 9/11 for a lot of people was their wake-up moment. I would say this was our wake-up moment, and it's probably the most common wake-up moment for a lot of people. But I'm grateful for that.
Well, I am too. I mean, I was I didn't have any issue with big pharma. I didn't even know there was a quote unquote big pharma. I didn't even know there was. It opened the door to big food, right? I mean, it opened the door to seeing all of the corruption. And I guess the unfortunate part is, will we ever trust these folks again when the time comes that we actually need to trust them? That's going to be the challenge. But
I think the answer to that is no.
No, probably not. And the nice thing is we have our people now. Like if there's ever another, they tried to swing this bird flu thing, and it's like we went right to our folks, right? Who we took us a long time to find our
monkeypox.
Yeah,
it's going to be a long time before they can pull one of these things out, and they're going to have to do a completely different. I guess it's the UFO invasion or something like that.
Well, yeah, or Russia.
They just use the same tricks in a different form.
Yeah.
I don't think...
The moral of the story is don't watch mainstream media, period. and believe everything the opposite of what they're telling you, and you're probably onto something, right?
Yeah. And I'm grateful overall. It's brought us closer, and I think though we both lost friends, ultimately it's put us on a course in life that I think we'll look back and go, that was the crossroads. That was the moment. That was where my conversations with my children shifted.
Yeah.
And it really tested us to see what metal we're made of.
Yeah. And I'm proud of the people in my life who who took a stand, and I'm proud of the stand I took with my family.
Yeah.
Because it was a lonely, hard road, and I look in the mirror and I'm proud, and I've never regretted any of it. And I think that even though people don't want to admit it, those who did get 4 or 5 jabs, there is a question mark. Did I do it right? When I obeyed everything? Even though they might not outwardly, I think deep down there's just like this, I don't know, something's swimming around in my system that's completely new.
Well, I think just like 9/11 didn't really resonate with us, perhaps if something else happens again in the future, then they'll start putting the pieces together.
Yeah, they get another chance to.
Yeah, like for some people it's the moon landing, or some people it's JFK assassination. Now we can piece all those things together and see the pattern. But I think for some people, or for all of us all leaving Christianity, it takes many, many tremors. And then there's a moment where the earthquake hits and you fully jolt back to reality. And you're like, fuck, oh my God, my life suddenly has to be rewritten because everything doesn't make sense anymore. And it's on a different time scale for each person. Right. Well, we'll talk when you're back from Mexico.
All right, Abs. Good times.
All right. Love you. Bye.
Bye.